Hello, and how you doing today? I'm going to be doing a bunch of stuff today. This is all started because yesterday I was talking with Bear, and he was trying to do a suborbital flight and having a horrible time with it. And I figured I'd better cover some of the basics because I obviously have missed a bunch of stuff for people. That large, thin segmented circle is the course that you want to fly. I've chosen a farm that's just over that hill there, which happens to be right there. The thick segmented circle is the angle of attack indicator. The 0 and plus that is actually red because I'm drifting backwards is the actual direction of travel bug. It was red because it was behind me. When these things turn red, they are behind you. Green, they're in front of you. When you're flying in space, I keep my wings perfectly level. Well, as close to level as possible, and the nose pointed the direction I need to travel. So if I'm traveling to a space station, my wings would be level, but pitched up at the target I'm going in, and I'm going to go into why about that in a little bit. But first, got a whole bunch of things to cover here. This is an E11. You will notice that from the side, you can see the engines are actually above the center line of the ship. That explains why the E11 has the tendency to pitch forward while you are thrusting and pitch nose up while you are decelerating using the engines in space. That's why you have to keep your hands on the control stick. I tend to fly the Manx more because the engines are much closer to center line. Now let's take a look at that E11 again. If we switch to the top-down view, what's happening when you fly, the thrust is coming out the back of each engine to accelerate you. If you have the ship canted off to one side, that thrust is still coming directly out the back of the ship. Regardless of where you want to go, it's coming out the back. You can use the side thrusters, which blow stuff out the side. You know, if you press the 7 key, if you're using keypad, on the number keypad, if you press the 7, it lights up the engines on this side of the cowling here, and that pushes the entire ship towards the right. If you press the 9, or if you press your top hat towards the right, that lights up the engines on the right hand side of the ship and pushes the ship towards the left. There are also top thrusters and bottom thrusters, which of course you press the stick down or press the F9 key, the thrusters on the bottom of the ship light up and the ship climbs. You press the F8 or push the top hat down and the ship descends. If you have the ship pointed off at a strange angle, like, let's say this one, if you light up these thrusters here, compared to the course you want to travel, you're now getting downward velocity, forward velocity, and right velocity, and you actually just wanted to go to the right. That's why it's important to keep your wings as level as possible, because it makes life simpler for you. Now let's talk about orientation to your travel. If you have your nose pointed, you want to travel on this dotted line here, and you have your nose pointed to the left, as you fire the main engines, what's going to happen is, yes, you're accelerating the direction you want to go, but you're also going to have to push the hat to the left or press the 7 to bring yourself back the direction you want to travel, which of course makes it harder for you. which is why I strongly recommend against doing that. In space, what do I use for my wing leveling? I'm lazy, I'll admit it, and I tend to use roll and pitch, and that's it. Once I've gotten myself up, going, and so on, and I'm doing a 6,000, today I'm going to be doing a 6,000 kilometer flight. Okay, let me scroll down. Kansas City Airport, that's where I'm going to be going. Once I get started on this flight and accelerate up to pretty close to orbital velocity, I'm going to switch from nav pitch to roll pitch because I want to level those wings. I don't want it kilting off if I drift off course. And yes, I will drift off course because the course is not going to be in line with the perfect orbit because I'm going to be traveling great circle. What is great circle, Bill? Well, if I draw a straight line from where I am, which is this dot right here, to that dot right there, which is where I'm going, you'll notice it's a straight line across the planet. But I'm not going to fly that way because that actually is longer than making a arcing up over the top. So the heading is constantly changing as you're flying. So if I use heading, what will happen is as the ship travels over the top of the North Pole, well, not completely the North Pole, but it'll probably get somewhere up in this general area as far as the course going. As I travel up over the northern hemisphere, the compass will change direction. So if I have the heading mode on the auto flight, what happens is the wings tend to tip, trying to make it so the ship changes heading because the heading bug doesn't know I'm changing because I'm traveling so far on a great circle route. That's why I go with wing leveling, the roll. Yeah, I think it's time to load up the ship and actually get going. Okay, let's back the seat up so I can see what I'm doing. Cargo bay doors are open. Go to the mining command. 6. Yes, I have a macro set on my joystick that allows me to change modes, and instead of typing all the cargo bays individually, what will happen is briefly for a moment here you will see plus all. 3 and 0 plus 7, that fills the ship completely for me. Okay. Let's back out of this. Okay. I like that screen while flying. And what I'm going to do is close the cargo bay doors. Lift off. Retract landing gear.
Struts retracted.
And use the rudder to turn my nose the direction I generally want to be flying. Yeah, I turned the auto flight off because I wanted to get rid of those flight director bars that were crooked. Okay, let's go to nav mode. And you'll notice I'm right now hands off.
Landing lights deactivated.
I'm going to climb at somewhere between a 10 and 15 degree up angle, probably closer to 15 here. Once I get to about 20, I'm then going to get back on the up thrust so I can get out of the heat as quickly as possible. you will notice that, yes, I do have the origin where I took off from basically as, oh, ice. That's what I get for leaving the ship parked up in 6 kilometers of elevation overnight. It cooled off. I have the last place that I left. Last is the place that I left so that I know how many kilometers I have traveled once I get going, because I'll use that number for when I want to start braking for my deorbit burn. It's kind of Bill's simple way of knowing when to start braking. What happens is you can accelerate only so fast, and you can only decelerate basically the same. Well, actually, since you're using the atmosphere to decelerate, you're going to decelerate a little bit faster. So, if you climb
Passing
up
sound barrier.
and it takes you 2,000 kilometers to get going at orbital velocity, you know that it's going to take you 2,000 kilometers to decelerate. So that's all I'm doing there. It's not that is the least rocket science thing we're going to be talking about today. It's just Bill being lazy. Thank you. I think I've burned off enough of the ice, so let's turn the de-icing off and get that 5% of engines back. You'll notice that they went from 95 back to 100 when I turned the de-icing off. That's because 5% of the thrust was being diverted to ducts along the leading edges and the wings to melt any ice that was there. I do not need the waypoint manager. Okay. And I think I'm gonna get on either the F9 thrust, which is the ones blowing out the bottom, or for me it's actually using the top hat because I use a joystick. So I'm pressing, you notice that the vertical thrust went from just about, the vertical g-force went from just about 1.1 up to, well, now it's back to the 1.2 because the nose is actually pitching down a little bit to try and compensate for how fast it's climbing. I'm going to hold that up thrust probably till I get about 65, 70 kilometers, because with a fully loaded E10, well, actually this is an E11, with a fully loaded E11, I'll get going somewhere around 600 meters a second up and in this climb here, and I don't need to be going that fast when I get up to the 120 that I'm trying to go at. I like flying at 120 kilometers because it's high enough that you are out of the atmosphere and you're not heating up, and you're still in the cold space between before it goes back up. That's one of the weird things about space. Above 120 kilometers, it really the temperature goes back up before you get out into interstellar space, where it goes back down. It's just one of those weird effects with the sun, the photons accelerating, and I mean, it's really bizarre math as to why space is hot, but then it's cold at the same time because there's nothing there. Okay, that's probably getting close to where I need to get off the F9 thrust. Let's go about 75, it looks like, today. Okay, I just got off the F9 thrust. You'll notice that my vertical thrust dropped to 0 because I'm no longer using the engines to push myself up. And since we're down to Q of 1 and basically no atmospheric pressure, I don't have to worry about heating the wings strange. So I'm going to lower the nose straight at the horizon, so I'm getting the maximum power out of my engines, because I want to keep going the direction I want to go. Now, if I noticed that I was off, let's say I was off, well, I am slightly off course to my left, which means I want to go to the right, so I need to fire up either the 7 key or the top hat to the left a little bit. So let's just push that on, and you'll notice I'm back on course already. And I'm probably going to need a little more up thrust because I'm not going to reach my 120. So let's just press the up thrust just a little bit. Once I get orbital data right here as far as how fast I'm flying, well, not how fast, but how high I'm going to fly, how low I'm going to go, and my inclination and eccentricity and so on and so forth. Once I get that, I'm going to shut the main engines off and just use the other small engines to try and keep myself in a perfect circle, because I want to be at 120. And I let go of the vertical thrust too early, because I am definitely going down. Okay, that should get me somewhere close. Since I am heading easterly, well, east, my ground speed is going to be somewhere 5.2. If I was on the equator, it'd be lower, but it's going to be somewhere 5.2, 5.4 for my ground speed before I get the orbital data. And if you're going west, you actually have to add the rotation speed of the planet in, and so on, so you have to be going even faster, because what's happening is the planet is rotating and your ground speed just double the 350 that the planet rotates towards the east. So it's 700 meters a second roughly at the equator. And I'm not quite wings level, so let's flip to nav. I'm sorry, to roll. And level my wings as close to level as I can get them. Now I can use the rudder to keep my nose lined up with the direction of the course bug, with the course bug there. You'll notice I am just using small taps on the top hat, or if you're flying with the keyboard, the F9 and the 7 and 9 keys, to try and get myself perfectly aligned with the course that I want. And yes, this entire time the planet is rotating underneath me, so I will end up having to make a couple course corrections, because it does not take that into the autoflight does not take that into effect into account as you're flying, because that would be speed dependent, Now, if you're flying faster than orbital speed, that would change the amount of time that you're in space. Therefore, that would change the amount of lead it'd have to give you. You just have to accept the fact that you are going up. Orbital data. Let's throttle down. Let's use the F8, pressing the top hat up so that I get rid of this extra climb that I don't need anymore. Okay, let's give myself just a little down, and now I'm going to use the home key. Well, actually I have that mapped on my joystick, but if you press the home key, you'll notice I've got a thrust of minus 0.2 Gs because the engines are just gently pushing backwards a little bit, and I'm going to bring the altitude of at apogee down to somewhere 120-ish. By the way, you'll notice that I took to right around 1,500 kilometers to get to orbital velocity. So that means when I have my waypoint is within 14 is when I'm gonna fire up my reverse thrust to start my braking. Okay, let's see. Too far. Okay. Now you'll notice that I have drifted just a little bit. I guess you'd call that south. Well, it's to the right of the ideal course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the top hat to the right, or I could press the the 9 key on the keypad. That lights up the engines on the right. You can hear them. And you'll see that the direction of travel bug is coming closer to center. And that's close enough. And now you will also notice that my AP dropped a little bit because I was adjusting the velocities, which is why you want to keep the engines as close to level as you can. I cannot stress enough, if you are doing a suborbital flight and not going to the space station, how important it is to keep the wings level. The more you have your wings kilted off to one side, your nose kilted off to one side, the more you have to make corrections to your corrections. Because if you fire up the engines on this side of the ship and you're actually putting thrust, well, I should be looking down here. If you're firing up the engines on this side of the ship to push yourself to the north here a little bit, and you have your right wing tip down, you'll be changing your direction of travel both to the right and also vertically, which affects your altitudes at apogee and perigee. If you have your nose off course, you're slowing yourself or accelerating yourself, which it just horrible things, and you end up having to make corrections to your corrections to your corrections. And the planet keeps spinning underneath me, which is why I'm having to go put some more right thrust in. Those of you who are observant will notice how rapidly my heading is changing, even though I am still facing the same direction. That's because I've actually curved up to 50 degrees north over the planet. I started what? Let's see. Bethlehem is 24.0. So I've gone 25 degrees further north, and I'm actually now starting back down south, even though, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still facing the same direction. It's the planet is rotating underneath me. Well, I'm scooting over the top of the planet. I'm, as I said, scooting over the top of the planet. Relative to me, the planet's turning, but realistically, it's the planet is there, and I'm going a great circle route over the top. Okay. So this is what I'm going to keep doing. I'm just going to keep pressing, in this case, the right thrusters, because I'm going to have the planet turning underneath me, and this little dot here, as far as I'm concerned, is racing that way at 350 meters a second. I'm up top here, and I'm going to have to keep pressing the right thrust, because as I'm on this arc here, let's actually refresh this page. As I'm on this arc, it's going to go blip, 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 blip. As I'm here, that dot, as far as I'm concerned, is moving 350 meters a second that way, which means I have to keep using the right thruster to try and keep lined up with it as it rotates away from me. And that's what I'm going to be doing until I get to about 1400. I'm going to go for 1300 kilometers, and then I'm going to start braking hard. So I'm going to pause the video while I go the next 2,500 kilometers. Talk to you in a minute. So welcome back. It's been about 9 minutes since you were last here. I'm down to 1,400 kilometers. And if you take a quick look at the ground track, you'll notice I've actually traveled a fair amount further, and I'm about ready to start decelerating for landing. Okay, so let's put the engines in reverse. The time that you guys were away, well, that I had the video recorder paused, I just kept randomly tapping the right-hand thrusters to keep myself lined up with the target. And let's start braking. What's going to happen is I'm going to use the F9, the up thrusters, to keep myself at around 220 kilometers. I'm sorry, 120 kilometers until I get my ground speed somewhere 3, 2.5, somewhere in that happy neighborhood. If you start down too fast, what happens is you build up heat. Heat is caused by speed, and heat's a bad thing. Heat kills you. Since the E10 and E11 both have very strong upthrust. You can keep the ship, well, if you wanted to, you could just turn on TVM, target vector matching, at an altitude of about 1,000 kilometers directly over your target, and you could stay there for hours. I mean, if you started this with full tanks and you just hovered over that spot with no ground speed at, say, 500 kilometers, it'd probably take you an hour to... Well, no, it'd take you longer than that. It'd take you a long time, because you're only going to descend at about 10 meters a second. So, yeah, it'd take a long time for you to descend if you turn TVM on, but that's very wasteful, and I don't like wasting gas if I don't have to. So I am now using the upthrust to keep myself... Hang on for a second, my phone's going stupid. Oh, hey. It looks like my phone blocked this stupid spam message on phone call. Now, as I get to about 480 kilometers away, what's going to happen is the direction bug is going to switch from... The best way to describe it is artificially great circle, keeping everything level, and actually mapping things to the surface of the planet. So that's what's going to happen at about somewhere between 480 down to about 400. The direction bug is going to drop down. And I definitely want to keep back on the upthrust because I don't want to enter the atmosphere quite yet. Come on. Oh, I guess I could start down. I'm down to 2.5. So yeah, I'm just using the thrusters to keep myself lined up with the target. Gonna lower my nose down to about 15 degrees. And I'm just gonna let the ship start falling. So I'm gonna let the ship engines keep slowing me down. What's gonna happen is, since I'm not generating any lift yet, I mean, I have no dynamic pressure, I have no atmospheric pressure, I'm in free fall right now. And I'm gonna keep falling probably till I get to about 40 kilometers because I'm going so slow. Using the upthrust to make it so I keep my direction of travel bug the same general direction as the course I want. Since I'm so close now, I'm going to switch back to nav mode and let the wings actually start to, as they generate lift, help correct my course for the final descent. You'll notice that my dynamic pressure is now 11 and climbing, and I actually have 1 millibar of pressure. If I let off the top hat, you'll notice I'm actually generating 0.1 Gs of lift just from the wings. Now I'm going to keep riding that F9 right now because I'm falling faster than I want to. I say F9, it's top hat, whatever you want to call it, because there are people that fly with joystick and there are people that fly with keyboard. So I have to refer to it both ways because you can do it both ways. Okay, right now it looks like I'm generating about 0.7 Gs of actual lift when I have the nose up enough. Okay, as I get under half a kilometer a second, I'm actually going to shut the engines off. Turning the reverse off so that I can actually start flying this like a plane again. Okay. Gonna bring in a little bit of thrust to try and keep my speed right or just right around half a kilometer a second. And it's gonna slowly bleed off as I come in. And let's see how I'm ballooning a little because I'm generating too much lift. All I'm going to do is I'm going to keep tapping the throttle up and down to try and keep myself flying right at that landing zone that I want. This part here, not rocket science. This part's basic flying. If you've ever flown an ILS on any of the other games out there or in real life, I'm using the throttle to adjust my altitude.
Passing sound barrier.
Well, technically I'm using the throttle to adjust my rated descent. But yes, you'll notice that my airframe temperature has gotten to 32.6 and I started, I think it was 1, somewhere around there. So a suborbital hop cost me somewhere 30 degrees, 33 degrees. And by the time I land, it will drop back down probably 27. So yeah, you can do this all day long if you budget yourself the fuel and the time. And yes, I had a lot of extra fuel because I was lazy. Normally I'd have tried this flight with somewhere around 9 to 10,000 kilos, 9 or 10 tons of fuel. But this is actually the third leg of this flight, and I started with a full fuel tank before I did the other legs. I'm gonna take a little bit of this throttle off because I actually want to try and increase my rate of sync just a little bit, because I want to be able to level out and come in at a non-Swiss idle angle. Throttle back because don't want to have too high of an angle of attack. Yes, as I said, that thick broken circle is your angle of attack indicator. Just about 1,000 meters above the ground. Let's raise my head up a little bit so I can see what I'm doing outside the windows.
Sync rate. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
Just using the auto flight to raise my nose up a little bit.
Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Struts. Minimums. Minimums. Struts extended. 100. 50. 30. 10.
Come on.
50. 30. 10.
Oops.
Landing lights
Probably need to
activated.
turn landing lights on, don't I?
Minimums. Minimums. Pull up. Sync rate 100.
I'm looking forward to having landing lights on the runway so I know where I'm going instead of a dark field.
Don't sink. Don't sink. Pull up. Pull up. Minimums. Minimums. Don't sink. Don't sink.
I think I'm over the landing field. So let's turn TVM
Don't sink.
on.
Stall. Don't sink. Stall. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. 20.
And I made it. So that's how I do a 6,000 and change, well, 7,702 kilometer suborbital flight. I'll talk to you later.